The phone rang at 2 a.m., and when I saw my brother's name on the screen, I knew something was wrong. His voice was cold, sharp, almost cruel. "Mom died last night," he said, each word hitting me like a hammer. Then came the punch I did not see coming. I inherited everything. You get nothing. I froze. My heart raced. My hands shook. A lifetime of memories, of sacrifices, of family loyalty, all erased in a single call. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I smiled, but not for the reason he thought. My name is Daniel, and I am 28 years old. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone's business, but no one really knows your pain. My mother, the rock of our family, passed away unexpectedly last night. She was the glue that held us all together, the voice of reason when my brother Jason and I argued over nothing. Jason is 2 years older than me, with a sharp tongue and a mind always scheming for advantage. We were never close, not really, and I had learned early to keep my expectations low. Growing up, I thought we were a typical family, maybe a little broken but loving in our own way. Mom worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on, and Dad had left when we were children, leaving her to raise us alone. I idolized her, even when she was exhausted. When her hands were raw from cleaning and cooking, when she stayed up late helping me with homework, she barely understood. Mom made sacrifices for both of us, but it was always Jason who got the lion's share of attention. He had a way of charming everyone, making himself look like the golden boy, while I worked in silence, unnoticed. I worked nights at a local warehouse, long shifts, moving boxes, my hands calloused and aching. Jason had chosen a path of ease, moving to the city after high school, always chasing opportunity, or so he claimed. He called me naive. He called me weak. And I allowed him to believe it, quietly, because the last thing I wanted was conflict. I thought patience would earn me respect, but last night proved how wrong I was. The phone call came just after midnight. I had just crawled into bed, still sweaty from unloading pallets at work. The ringtone made my stomach drop. Seeing Jason's name flash on the screen was the first warning that something had gone horribly wrong. I answered, expecting him to laugh, to tease, or maybe to call about some trivial matter, but instead, his words hit me like a sledgehammer. "Mom died last night," he said, his voice colder than I had ever heard. I could hear a smirk in the pause that followed. "I inherited everything," he continued, as if reading from a script written to torment me. "You get nothing." I remember sitting there in the darkness, the phone pressed against my ear, my chest tightening, my vision narrowing. I could feel the blood draining from my face. The room around me seemed to shrink, the walls closing in, and for the first time in years, I felt powerless. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, to remind him who I was, but the words lodged in my throat. My mother, my anchor, my protector, was gone. And Jason had turned the knife completely. It was not just the inheritance, it was the betrayal, the calculated cruelty. Jason knew I had relied on Mom's support, her guidance, her subtle nudges that helped me navigate life's challenges. He knew I had nothing without her, and he chose this moment to crush me. There was a silence after he spoke, but it was not empty. It was heavy with menace, with the satisfaction of someone who thinks they have one. I did not speak. I simply hung up, staring at the ceiling, replaying his words over and over. The room was cold, but my anger burned hotter than any fire. I thought back to all the times he had belittled me, all the moments he had stolen recognition or manipulated situations to his favor. I remembered our arguments over trivial things that, at the time, seemed meaningless, but now took on a sinister clarity. Every slight, every insult, every moment of disregard coalesced into a sharp, focused edge in my mind. I realized something terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. I was underestimated, dismissed, ignored, and that made Jason dangerously confident. He thought he had one. I spent the rest of the night wandering our childhood home, now eerily quiet. The rooms smelled faintly of lavender and old books, Mom's favorite scent lingering as if she had never left. I touched her photographs, her trinkets, her letters tucked into drawers I had not opened in years. Memories of laughter, small arguments, quiet nights, and her gentle voice overwhelmed me. And somewhere deep inside, a seed of something darker took root. By dawn, I had made a decision. I would not allow Jason's arrogance to define me. I would not sit idly by while he claimed victory over a family that had shaped both of us. Something had shifted in me that night. The grief was still there, sharp and aching. But beneath it was a cold, calculated determination. I knew what had to happen next, though I had no idea exactly how it would unfold. But one thing was certain: the game had changed. I glanced at the old clock, its ticking louder than usual, marking each second that passed. Each tick reminded me that time was fleeting, that opportunity waits for no one, and that justice, in the form it deserved, could be mine. And yet, I felt the thrill of anticipation, the kind that rises when the stakes are highest and the outcome uncertain. Jason had thought he had won. He had no idea what was coming. The air in the room felt electric, almost alive, as if the house itself knew that the balance had shifted. I could not sleep anymore. I could not retreat into denial or grief. I had to act, to plan, to wait patiently while the perfect moment revealed itself. And as the first rays of sunlight crept through the blinds, illuminating the dust in the air, I whispered to myself, "He thinks he got everything. He has no idea what he just started." If you have ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, hit that like button and subscribe now. This story will take you on a journey of heartbreak, betrayal, and the ultimate revenge that will leave you shocked. Stay until the end. You will see how patience, strategy, and justice can completely turn the tables. The days after Mom's funeral were unbearable. Jason moved through the house like a conqueror, as if claiming every corner, every memory, every object Mom had left behind. He laughed too loud, paced too confidently, and spoke to me as if I were invisible. Every glance, every smirk, felt like a personal attack. I realized quickly that he was not just taking the inheritance, he was taking my dignity. I stayed in my childhood room, the one Mom had painted pale blue, its walls now echoing with silence. Jason's footsteps on the creaking wooden floors became a soundtrack of torment. He brought his friends over, people I barely knew, and they treated the house like it was a playground. I could hear their laughter in the kitchen late at night, the clinking of glasses, the casual way they tossed empty wrappers across the counters, and I could not touch anything. Every inch of space he claimed, every possession he flaunted, stoked a fire I could barely contain. He called me one evening, his voice mocking. "Why are you even here, little brother? You do not belong in this house anymore." Mom would have wanted me to take care of things. I could feel my jaw tighten, my hands clenching into fists. I wanted to shout, to remind him of every sacrifice Mom had made for both of us. But I said nothing. I let him speak, each word digging a deeper trench of anger inside me. He posted pictures online, showing off Mom's belongings, jewelry, furniture, even a collection of antique books she had cherished. The captions were cruelly casual. "Mom's legacy, my rewards. Daniel, maybe next time you will work harder." The public nature of it made the betrayal sting even more. I scrolled through the comments, seeing friends and distant relatives praising him, admiring him. I could not breathe, not because of envy, but because they had no idea how calculated he was, how hollow his charm really was. I started noticing small things that were worse than his arrogance. He would leave bills in my room, a passive-aggressive reminder that I had no claim here. He changed the locks on the house's front door. He started subtly undermining my job applications, calling potential employers, and spreading lies about me. He knew exactly how to hurt me without leaving traces that could be challenged. Every action, no matter how small, was deliberate cruelty. One evening, I overheard him talking on the phone with a lawyer, laughing as he discussed liquidating Mom's assets. The way he spoke, confident, smug, unchallenged, made my stomach churn. He was blind to one thing. He had assumed I would crumble, that I would disappear into resentment and despair. But in reality, something was awakening inside me. I started noticing patterns, his arrogance, his predictable pride. It was all so reckless. He left openings without realizing it. I began spending long nights walking through Mom's belongings, touching the objects he coveted, memorizing their placement. Each time I traced my fingers over her photographs or letters, I imagined a way to turn the tables, to reclaim the balance that Jason had shattered. The injustice fueled me. I did not want revenge for the sake of anger alone. I wanted justice. I wanted to prove that he could not simply rewrite the story of our family without consequence. I started keeping a journal, writing down every slight, every insult, every step he had taken to humiliate me. I cataloged his arrogance, his overconfidence, and his predictable routines. He thought he had mastered the game, but the deeper I studied him, the more I realized just how vulnerable he truly was. Each careless boast, every smug gesture, every underestimation became a piece of a puzzle I could exploit. It was in those quiet hours, under the dim light of my desk lamp, that I felt a dangerous thrill. I could almost see the plan forming in my mind, like a shadow weaving itself into clarity. Not a rash act, not a moment of blind fury, but a careful, precise orchestration. I whispered to myself over and over, "He does not see me. He never did, but he will." I began observing his habits obsessively. The way he drank his coffee every morning at exactly 7:15. The route he took to work, the friends he trusted blindly. I noticed the way he gushed over small victories on social media. The way he flaunted Mom's possessions, without even considering the consequences. He was predictable, and that predictability was my advantage. The tension built like a storm cloud on the horizon. Every interaction, every glance, every silent confrontation was electric. I could feel my pulse quicken just thinking about the moment when all of this would turn around. Jason was powerful in appearance, but his confidence was brittle, his arrogance unguarded. He had assumed the crown without seeing the trap being laid. By the end of the week, I had a clear sense of what had to happen. Not yet, not immediately. I had to wait, to observe, to ensure every move I made would strike at the perfect moment. The anticipation was almost unbearable, but it sharpened my mind. Every detail mattered, every step counted. I had learned to hide my excitement behind calmness, to keep my expressions neutral, to let him believe I was defeated. And yet, in the quiet moments when I was alone with my thoughts, I felt a strange satisfaction. The tables were slowly turning, piece by piece. Jason thought he had won. He thought I had nothing. But what he did not know was that I had begun building my own power, quietly, invisibly. And soon, very soon, he would realize just how badly he had miscalculated. It happened on a Thursday evening, though I will never forget the smell, the sound, or the way the world seemed to tilt that night. Jason had invited one of his friends over, a man I barely knew, to celebrate his new inheritance. They were in the living room, drinking and laughing as if nothing mattered, as if Mom's death had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. The air in the house was thick with arrogance and entitlement, and each laugh was a dagger in my chest. I tried to remain in the shadows, unnoticed, but even my own presence seemed invisible to them, an afterthought in Jason's world. I had been careful until that moment, silent, observing, cataloging, planning. I had restrained myself, convincing myself that patience was necessary. But the sound of him bragging about the jewelry, Mom's personal collection, her letters, her savings, his voice dripping with glee snapped, something inside me. My chest tightened so much I could barely breathe. My hands shook uncontrollably. I felt an anger I had never known before, a raw, animalistic fury that threatened to consume me entirely. He lifted a crystal glass, swirling the amber liquid, and smiled at his friends, eyes sparkling with pride. "Everything Mom left me is mine. Daniel, you really think you deserve any of this? Pathetic." He laughed again, louder this time, and I could feel the heat rising in my face. I wanted to scream, to tear the words from his mouth, to force him to understand the depths of his cruelty. But I did not move. I could not. My body was frozen, paralyzed by a mixture of rage and grief. And then something shifted. The rage sharpened, focused, as if the years of being overlooked, belittled and dismissed were condensing into a single point of clarity. I realized that nothing he said, nothing he did, had the power to hurt me anymore. Not really. What hurt me had been his arrogance, his entitlement, his assumption that he could erase me from Mom's legacy and from my own life. But now, in the silence between his laughs, I felt a cold certainty settle over me. I would not be a victim. I would not crumble. I would act. I left the room silently, retreating to my childhood bedroom. The walls seemed to close in on me, the familiar pale blue, now a canvas for the storm raging inside my mind. I could still hear his laughter echoing down the hallway, a sound that had once filled me with fear and now fueled determination. I sat at my desk, hands gripping the edge until my knuckles turned white, heart hammering in a rhythm that felt both frantic and controlled. I realized that Jason had made a fatal mistake. He had underestimated me. I began to think, really think, for the first time without fear clouding my judgment. Every small slight, every moment of ridicule, every underhanded move Jason had made over the years crystallized into a map, a blueprint for what needed to happen next. I would not rush. I would not act blindly, but I would act with precision, patience, and inevitability. The more I thought, the more the plan began to take shape, like a shadow becoming solid in the dim light of my room. My mind raced, connecting dots I had ignored before. Jason's arrogance, his reliance on others, his need to flaunt power, these were weaknesses, not strengths. His obsession with appearances left gaps in his armor. Every boast, every careless gesture, every smug smile had an echo of vulnerability. He was so sure of himself, so certain of his victory, that he did not see the trap forming around him, and I would be the one to set it. I remember pacing the room that night, moving from window to window, from desk to bed, unable to sit still. The air was heavy, tinged with the scent of old paper and dust, and each step I took felt like a drumbeat of inevitability. I whispered to myself, a mantra more than a thought: he thinks he has one. He thinks he has everything. He does not see what is coming. I could feel a cold thrill spreading through me, a dangerous clarity that was both exhilarating and terrifying. By the early hours of the morning, I had made a decision. I would wait, I would observe, I would prepare, but I would not be passive. I would turn every small advantage Jason had into a weapon against him, every misstep into leverage. My grief, my anger, my sense of injustice, all of it would be transformed into action, methodical and precise. I would make him understand, in a way that left no room for denial, that I was not the weak, overlooked brother he thought I was. That night, I lay awake in Mom's old bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining the moment of reckoning. The details were not yet complete, the plan not fully formed, but the certainty was absolute. Jason's laughter, once unbearable, now echoed like a countdown to a storm. Every step he took in that house, every careless word, every smug smile, he was leading me directly to my opportunity, and I would not let it pass. For the first time since Mom's death, I felt a sense of control, a dangerous empowerment that made my pulse quicken. The breaking point had come, not in a single act of violence or confrontation, but in the realization that I had the power to turn everything around. Jason had assumed he was untouchable. He had assumed he had erased me, he had assumed the story was his, but the story was far from over. And in that quiet, electric darkness, I whispered again, almost to myself, almost as a warning to the universe: he will regret every word. He will regret every laugh, and he will learn the cost of underestimating me. The plan did not arrive all at once. It built itself slowly, piece by piece, like a puzzle assembling in the dark. I started with silence. Silence was my weapon. Jason believed silence meant surrender, and I let him believe that. I lowered my eyes when he entered a room. I kept my answers short. I moved carefully, like someone afraid of conflict. Every time he smirked, every time his shoulders relaxed, I knew the disguise was working. At night, I wrote everything down: dates, times, conversations, his phone calls, his visitors, his careless habits. I mapped his world until I could predict his movements better than he could. The scratch of my pen against paper was the only sound in the room, steady and deliberate. Each note made me calmer. Each detail made me stronger. He trusted the wrong people. That was the first crack in his armor. Jason surrounded himself with people who admired his power, not people who respected him. Admiration is fragile. It turns quickly when fear or profit enters the room. I noticed how his lawyer visits were rushed, how paperwork lay scattered on the dining table, how confidential documents were left in open folders. Jason treated control like a performance, not a responsibility. One evening when he left in a hurry, I saw it, a folder half open, legal documents, asset lists. I let my heart slow first. I listened for his car. I waited until the street was quiet. Then I stepped closer. Every movement careful, controlled. My fingertips brushed the paper like it was fire. I read enough to understand one thing clearly. Jason had rushed everything. He had claimed ownership without finishing the process. He had spoken like a king before securing the crown, and that was where his arrogance would destroy him. My breath was slow and steady as I photographed the pages. Each click of my phone camera felt like a heartbeat. Proof, evidence, leverage. I closed the folder exactly as I had found it. No trace, no disturbance, only progress. From that moment, my plan became real. I began making quiet phone calls, not confrontational, curious, polite. I spoke to the probate office. I spoke to legal aid. I asked simple questions, like a confused son trying to understand his rights. And every answer pointed in the same direction. Jason had lied. He had no legal authority yet. He had acted before the system had finished its work. That knowledge was electric. I felt it in my chest, a slow-burning power that replaced my grief with precision. This was no longer emotional. This was strategic. Jason continued his performance. He sold small items. He bragged. He posted more photos. He grew louder, more careless, more confident. He was building his own case against himself without realizing it. Every sale was a violation. Every post was a timestamp. Every brag was evidence of intent. I began collecting screenshots, messages, public statements, digital footprints that could not be erased. The glow of my phone screen lit my face late at night as I documented his downfall, one click at a time. But I did not stop there. I visited a lawyer in a neighboring town, someone Jason had never met, someone who did not know our family name. I walked into that office with calm in my voice and fire in my eyes. I laid everything out. The phone call, the threats, the lies, the rushed claims, the documents, the evidence. The lawyer leaned back in his chair and looked at me carefully. "He has no legal standing yet," he said. "What he is doing is not just unethical, it is illegal." That word settled into my bones. Illegal. I walked out of that office feeling taller, stronger, sharper. Jason had tried to erase me emotionally. Now the law would erase his illusion of power. The execution had to be clean. Public enough to humiliate him, controlled enough to protect me. We waited until the court date was set, until Jason was confident, until he had gone too far to retreat quietly. The day came faster than I expected. We stood in the courthouse hallway, Jason, in his expensive jacket, smiling like a man who believed he owned the future. Me, in simpleclothes.com, silent, invisible, he barely looked at me. That was his final mistake. When the hearing began, his confidence filled the room. He spoke like a winner. He referenced ownership like it was already written in stone. The judge listened. Then my lawyer stood. The shift was immediate. Documents were presented. Dates were challenged. Claims were questioned. Screenshots were displayed. Sales records surfaced. Online posts were projected. His smile faded slowly, like light dying in a room. Jason turned to look at me. For the first time since Mom died, his eyes showed something real. Fear. His voice cracked as he tried to explain. The more he spoke, the worse it became. Contradictions stacked, lies collapsed. The judge's expression hardened. By the time the ruling came, Jason was no longer standing tall. His shoulders slumped, his hands trembled. The illusion was gone. All asset transfers were frozen. Investigations were opened. Ownership claims were suspended. His actions were officially under legal scrutiny. The king had fallen before he ever wore the crown. As we walked out, Jason reached for my arm. His grip was weak, desperate. "You planned this," he whispered. I looked at him calmly. No anger, no triumph, only truth. "You planned your own downfall," I said. The air outside felt different. Lighter, sharper, alive. My chest rose with a deep breath that felt like freedom. This was not rage anymore. This was justice unfolding exactly as it should. But I was not finished. This was only the beginning of his reckoning. The courtroom had been the opening act. What followed would be the performance Jason would never forget. It started slowly, like a storm rolling in, building tension with every passing moment. I watched from across the room as he strutted into the house that had once been ours. Confident, arrogant, the type of confidence only someone untested could wear. Every step echoed in the polished floors, a drumbeat of hubris. Jason had invited a small gathering friends, distant relatives, and neighbors who had always admired him. They waited, unaware that the evening would not unfold as they expected. The chandelier above glimmered, catching the faint light in a way that made the room look pristine, untouched, perfect. But beneath the surface, chaos was about to erupt. I arrived quietly, unnoticed, blending into the shadows. My pulse thrummed like a drum. Every nerve in my body vibrated with anticipation. Jason did not see me. He never had. He assumed I was irrelevant, a ghost in my own life. But tonight, the ghost was no longer silent. The first strike was subtle. I placed a folder on the dining table where it could be discovered without suspicion. A casual glance would reveal documents proving his illegal transfers, his misrepresentation of Mom's estate, and his cavalier destruction of her legacy. I stepped back, letting fate take its course. It did not take long. He bent down, pretending curiosity, and as his eyes scanned the pages, a flicker of unease crossed his face. Then his voice, usually smooth, full of arrogance, wavered. "What is this?" he muttered, loud enough for his friends to hear. Heads turned. I remained calm, composed, watching as the first crack appeared in his armor. The next moments were almost theatrical. Messages, screenshots, and evidence I had collected carefully, meticulously were revealed, one by one, each like a hammer striking at the foundation of his confidence. His friends exchanged confused glances. The neighbors whispered. The air thickened with tension. Jason's smirk disappeared, replaced by a grimace that twisted his face in disbelief. I could see it in him. Fear, panic, the realization that every boast, every careless gesture, every smug assumption had been recorded, documented, and exposed. His arrogance had become his own trap. Every word he had uttered in pride now echoed against him, like an accusation reverberating through the room. "Daniel," he said, voice tight, almost pleading. "You cannot." I cut him off with a calm, controlled gaze. "I did not need to. You did it yourself." The room seemed to hold its breath. Even the chandelier's light dimmed in my perception, as if the world itself paused to witness the reckoning. Jason stumbled, trying to regain composure, but it was futile. The legal papers, the evidence of his recklessness, the digital footprints, it all painted a picture too clear, too precise to deny. By the time the authorities arrived, called quietly earlier by my lawyer, Jason was already unraveling. They took statements, examined documents, and questioned him with a seriousness he had never faced. His friends drifted away, awkward, uncomfortable, unsure where loyalty ended and legality began. His confidence had been stripped bare, leaving only shame and fear. I stepped forward then, for the first time fully visible to him. His eyes widened. My heart, pounding steadily for weeks, now felt steady, centered, controlled. "You thought you could erase me," I said, voice calm, almost serene. "You thought I was nothing. But you forgot one thing. I am still here." And I remembered everything. The words hit him like cold steel. I could see the fight leave his body, the tension in his shoulders vanish, replaced by the weight of humiliation. He had imagined triumph, conquest, superiority. All of it collapsed in moments, replaced by exposure, accountability, and the stark reality of his arrogance. I did not yell. I did not gloat. I let the silence do the work. The quiet, heavy, suffocating silence of a man stripped of his illusions, standing before the consequences he had ignored for so long. His face, usually so controlled, betrayed him entire. Liches, flushes, and finally, defeat. The last act was my own private satisfaction. I allowed a slow smile, not of cruelty but of release. Relief washed over me in waves I did not expect. The anger that had burned so brightly for weeks transformed into something purer, validation. Proof that patience, strategy, and restraint could overpower arrogance and cruelty. The neighbors whispered, the friends shuffled away, and Jason stood alone, staring at the floor. His empire of false confidence had crumbled, piece by piece, evidence by evidence. I could almost hear Mom's voice in my mind, calm, proud, approving. Justice had not been rushed, it had been earned. I walked past him, letting my presence be known without acknowledgement. He looked up briefly, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief, as if realizing that his world had changed in a single evening. And it had. Outside, the night air was crisp, clean, almost electric. I inhaled deeply, feeling the tension drain from my body. For the first time since Mom's death, I felt complete, not victorious in a petty way, but triumphant in a way that mattered. I had not just survived, I had not just endured. I had turned injustice into consequence, betrayal into proof, and arrogance into humiliation. I glanced back at the house one last time. Jason was inside, silent, humbled, stripped of pretense, and I knew something important. Some victories do not require fury. Some victories do not require shouting. Some victories only require patience, observation, and the courage to act when the moment is right. And tonight, the moment had been mine. The days after Jason's downfall felt surreal, almost dreamlike. The house, once filled with tension and fear, was quiet. The walls no longer seemed to close in on me, no longer echoed with his arrogance. I walked through the rooms slowly, touching the surfaces Mom had loved, seeing her presence in everything from the faded curtains to the old wooden floors. It was in that quiet that I finally allowed myself to breathe, fully and deeply, without anger constricting my chest. I realized something important. Revenge had not been about hatred. It had been about justice, about balance, about reclaiming a life that had been overshadowed by someone else's arrogance. I had felt powerless for so long, trapped in grief and injustice, believing that the world had dealt me a hand I could not change. But that was an illusion. The moment I decided to act with patience, intelligence, and courage, everything changed. Karma, I understood, is not instantaneous. It is not random. It is precise, inevitable, and often most powerful when you are willing to wait and observe. I thought about Jason a lot during those first days of calm. Not with anger anymore, but with a strange mixture of pity and clarity. He had been so sure of himself, so convinced of his superiority, that he had never paused to consider consequence. His arrogance had blinded him, and the world had a way of correcting those who refused to see reality. I did not celebrate his humiliation. I observed it, I acknowledged it, I understood that some lessons are learned only through experience, often painful and unavoidable. I also thought about Mom, how proud she would have been to see me navigate this storm without losing myself. She had taught me patience, resilience, and integrity, lessons I had sometimes failed to follow when I was younger. And yet, it was those lessons that guided me now. I had acted with precision, yes, but also with a sense of morality. I had waited for the right moment. I had avoided unnecessary cruelty. I had allowed justice to unfold rather than anger to dictate my actions. That, more than anything, felt like victory. In the stillness of the house, I began to see what truly mattered. Property, money, and possessions are fleeting. They can be taken, flaunted, or mismanaged. But integrity, patience, and clarity of mind, they are lasting. They are the things that cannot be stolen, and in that knowledge, I found peace. The fire that had burned so hot in me, driven by grief and betrayal, cooled into a steady warmth. I was no longer defined by loss or by someone else's cruelty. I was defined by my own choices, my own actions, and my own moral compass. I started thinking about the future, not the inheritance or what Jason had tried to claim, but my life beyond the family drama. I considered my work, my ambitions, the people I wanted to surround myself with. I realized that this experience, as painful and intense as it had been, had clarified my priorities. It had shown me the importance of observation, of patience, and of believing in my own ability to shape outcomes, even when others doubt or belittle me. I also reflected on the nature of justice. It is not always immediate. It is not always dramatic. Often it is quiet, subtle, and inevitable. Watching Jason face the consequences of his actions was not about gloating. It was about understanding cause and effect, about seeing the natural balance restored when arrogance meets reality. And that understanding brought a profound satisfaction that anger never could. I think about the lessons I have learned daily. First, never underestimate the quiet, the patient, the overlooked. Second observation is as powerful as action. Third, morality and precision are far more effective than rage. And finally, the past does not define you. It informs you, shapes you, and prepares you for the challenges you will face if you are willing to pay attention and act wisely. Most of all, I learned about resilience, about how grief, betrayal, and pain can transform into focus, clarity, and ultimately empowerment. I learned that power is not about domination or arrogance. It is about understanding, patience, and timing. The same house that had once trapped me in despair now felt like a sanctuary of clarity. I walked through it and saw not only what Jason had taken, but what I had earned: respect for myself, a deep understanding of strategy, and the quiet knowledge that I had reclaimed my life. As the sun set, casting long golden shadows across the living room, I sat in Mom's favorite chair and allowed myself to smile, not out of triumph over another, but out of relief and affirmation of my own strength. I understood that life would always bring challenges, that people would sometimes betray or underestimate me, but that those moments were opportunities. Opportunities to act with patience, to observe, to plan, and to emerge stronger than before. I looked out the window at the quiet street, the evening air crisp and calm. The world had not changed dramatically, but I had. I had turned grief into resolve, betrayal into strategy, and loss into clarity. And in that, I found peace. Some lessons come with pain. Some victories come with patience. Some moments, though born of sorrow, reveal who you truly are. And in that revelation, I understood this was not just revenge. This was a beginning. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated or betrayed like I was? Subscribe now, because there are more real-life stories of revenge, justice, and the power of patience coming every day on. You do not want to miss them.